Okay, folks, my name is Darren Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to give you context in the war in Ukraine. These are 6 big stories today. So we're going to start with this. Putin's spy chief, Nikolay Patrushev, says that Russia helped Trump win the presidential election, and he makes a veiled threat that Trump must now deliver on agreed upon quid pro quo. So is there really something there, or is he just saying that, or is he saying that in order to kind of stir the pot a little bit? So let's look at this. So this is the actual article in Commersant, and there was only one line in here that was anything useful related to Trump. There was a paragraph after where he talked about it, but this is the line. To achieve success in the elections, Donald Trump relied on certain forces to which he has corresponding obligations, and as a responsible person, he will be obliged to fulfill them. Yeah, I'm not sure Trump feels obliged to fulfill anything, so I'm not really terribly concerned about that, but he's hinting at that, and maybe it's to stir the pot. Maybe there actually were drones trying to help him, not just stir the population. But I don't think that's going to move Trump one way or another. The Kyiv Independent put this out, and I thought this was an interesting perspective. Putin is weak. Trump holds all the cards. Let's see if he can play his hand and secure the ultimate peace deal for Ukraine, what writes Chatham House Associate Fellow Timothy Ash. So let's look at the actual article here in the Kyiv Post. Now, there's some discussion like, well, Putin must have compromise on Trump. Okay. Even if he had compromise on him, so what? Trump has proven he can weather scandals. He once boasted he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue with no legal consequence. With this Teflon-like ability to survive the biggest controversies, Trump can call Putin's bluff on whatever compromising material he may have. That's if he has anything. Contrast this with Putin, whose invasion of Ukraine has become a catastrophe for Russia. Nearly 3 years into the full-scale invasion, Russia, a supposed great power, has failed to defeat Ukraine. That's right. Which was considered a third or fourth-rate military power at the war's outset. Not so much anymore. The war that was supposed to last 2 weeks has dragged on for over 1,000 days with no end in sight. Russia has lost perhaps 500,000 soldiers and much of its conventional military strength, so much so that it's now forced to use World War II era equipment. And the article goes on a little bit later. Trump, on the other hand, enters potential talks from a position of overwhelming strength. He needs a Ukraine peace deal far less than Putin does. Oh, but didn't he say that he'll solve it in 24 hours? Okay, and if he doesn't, what happens to him? Zero. Or do you think Trump is worried about, oh no, I didn't fulfill that 24-hour deal? No, he's not thinking like that. If Trump fails to reach an agreement, what are the consequences for the U.S.? Not much. Ukraine has shown its willingness to fight, and even if the U.S. cuts its financing, Europe will continue to support Ukraine, as it has the most to lose from Russia's aggression. And if funding is tight, Europe can tap into that $330 billion in frozen Russian assets. On the other hand, Putin has no leverage over Trump now, and Trump should play hardball. Trump is presented with a rare opportunity to broker the greatest peace deal ever. Why wouldn't he use all his leverage to extract maximum concessions from Putin? What does Putin bring to the table? What concessions can he offer Trump? Now, I know a lot of people say, well, but Trump is Putin's pet. I think that was a lot of election time rhetoric, and I don't know that that's actually the reality. Okay, let's continue. The Republican Party is projected to maintain its majority in the House of Representatives following the midterm elections. That means the House, the Senate, and the White House are all in Republican hands. That's dangerous because when any party has both the White House and both wings of Congress, they tend to overplay their hands, and it would be better for them to have a mixed Congress, but that's just not where they are. Okay, so let's look at what's going to happen in the Senate. We know that the Senate has gone to the Republicans. Now, Benny Johnson, who's a conservative MAGA kind of commentator, says a vote for John Thune is a vote to continue forever war. John Thune is currently the number 2 Republican in the Senate. He's about to become the number 1 Republican because McConnell is done and Thune will hopefully become the majority leader. This is the most unpopular issue with the Republican base. Senators need to severely rethink a vote for Thune, but that's a MAGA position. Many of the conservatives, the Republicans who are in the Senate, are conservatives, not MAGA populists. And so I hope that Thune actually wins. Now, the race is looking like it's coming down to Thune or Cornyn or Rick Scott. Cornyn's kind of on the same page as Thune. He's a former whip in the Senate as well. And I hope it's one of these two. Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, is very MAGA all the time. So we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll keep you posted. That's going to make a big difference, just in the same way that Mike Johnson controlled the agenda in the House. The Senate majority leader would control the agenda in the Senate. Okay. So, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has begun forming his administration. Here's what we know about them and their Ukraine stance. Susie Wiles will become his chief of staff. That was his campaign manager, but we don't really know what her views about Ukraine are. If you know what those are, I'd like to see them. Please pass those along. Now, Elise Stefanik is Trump's ambassador to the UN nominee, what Nikki Haley was. Now, Stefanik represents New York District 21. In 2022, she called the war Putin's genocide, but then she shifted her gears and she kind of became more on the MAGA side, but she'll be very pro-Israel, which will take Iran down a peg, but it's yet to be determined to see what her stance will be as far as Ukraine goes. Okay. Tom Homan is going to become a border czar, right? He's going to be in charge of dealing with what's going on at the border. And a czar in our system is not someone who has to be appointed and pass Senate muster. It's a little bit lower than that, but he'll be in charge of securing the border. This is important because as that gets fixed, it'll take away the excuse from Republicans to say, well, we have this problem with the border, so how can we spend this on Ukraine? If they fix this issue, they won't be able to say that kind of excuse about Ukraine. Okay, but he doesn't really have an impact on Ukraine. But this man does. This is Mike Waltz, not to be confused with Tim Walz. This is Mike Waltz. Congressman Mike Waltz is a retired colonel in the National Guard, combat decorated Green Beret, former White House and Pentagon policy advisor, small business owner, author, proud father. He's the first Green Beret to be elected to Congress. Now, Mike Waltz is Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor. So we'll be trading a lawyer in Jake Sullivan, who's overly cautious, for a former Green Beret in Mike Waltz. Now, let's look at a little bit about Mike Waltz and his background. When I visited Kyiv last year, I called the Biden administration to rush Ukraine, the lethal aid they had been requesting for months. They should have had it before Russia invaded, not after, he said on March 3rd, 2022. And then let's watch this clip from Fox News. Incoming U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz on April 5th, 2022. Putin will only stop when he meets cold, hard steel and military might. Let's listen to this.
GOP Congressman and National Guard Colonel Michael Waltz sits on the Armed Services Committee, and he joins us now. Colonel, thanks for being here. So you heard him say we need to supply weapons. You got it. And then quickly say we need to designate him as a war criminal. What does Vladimir Putin actually respect and care about now if we're trying to bring this war to a conclusion that's advantageous to the Ukrainians?
Why aren't we supporting Zelensky in an effort to win, to actually drive Russia completely off of Ukrainian soil?
Okay, so that's Waltz, and he's talking here on April 5th, 2022. Now let's look at this. Waltz, again, July 23, 2022. Where is he? He's in Kyiv. Let's look at, this is February 2023, as he's in Congress grilling the Biden administration's guys about what's going on.
We successfully deter Russia from invading Ukraine. Did deterrence work? We had a whole series of diplomatic, economic sanctions, the most powerful sanctions the world has ever seen, not to mention our ongoing security assistance at the time. Did that work? Was it successful?
Clearly, because he invaded Ukraine, Putin was not deterred.
So it's safe to say deterrence failed in this case.
Well, one possibility is also that Putin was not deterrable as it related to going into Ukraine. He has been deterred as it relates to going after the United States or NATO.
I think he's deterrable. We self-deterred in the process, so that's a terrible alibi.
So you would postulate that no matter what we provided Ukraine, deterrence would have failed.
I actually think that our intelligence community is split on this view. Their assessment was that almost no amount of weapons prior to the conflict could have deterred Putin from going into Ukraine.
Well, I asked this in the sense that I was in Ukraine the month before. And at the time, the answer that the Ukrainians...
So he was in Ukraine the month before the war began. How about that?
...were receiving, that we received, was that Stingers, too escalatory. Anti-ship missiles, too provocative. Long-range artillery, certainly off the books and improbable. Other things will take too long to train on.
So that was the Biden administration's posture going into the war. Okay, so that's who Waltz is. And this was another thing that Jay and Kiev pulled out and said, look, this is Waltz talking. First and foremost, you would enforce the actual energy sanctions on Russia. And you couple that with unleashing our energy, lifting our LNG, liquefied natural gas ban, and his economy, his war machine will just dry up very quickly. We have leverage, like taking off the handcuffs off long-range weapons. We provided Ukraine as well. And Jay and Kiev's comment was, if Trump administration people keep making these statements like this, there's going to be MAGA hats on in the street in Kiev soon. Allowing Ukraine long-range strikes, actually enforcing sanctions, flooding the world with U.S. gas and oil. Like, that's where they're going. Now, there's a downside as well. And before I get to the downside, I want to show you this. There's a kind of a split. I asked this on my poll. Only answer if you're on the political left. Thank you. So I said, what's more important, releasing or drilling for more oil to restrict Putin's revenue, or restricting oil to save the planet from climate change? And there's a split, about 2-to-1 split on the left side of the spectrum. There's no such split on the right side of the spectrum. They're not really worried about that kind of thing at all. They'll be happy to have more oil and it'll benefit the economy, and that's what Trump actually wants. Here's Waltz one last time.
Look, we can be allies and friends and have tough conversations. I have written speeches for 20 years, going back to Secretary Rumsfeld, practically begging our NATO allies to share their defense burden. The 2% of GDP is not a distant goal. I think Canada has it as a goal in 2032. That's completely unacceptable. And we can be friends and allies and have tough conversations. 2% is the minimum. We need to be celebrating those like Poland and like the Baltics who exceed that. And my question is, with the worst and most destructive war on their doorstep in Ukraine since World War II, if not now, then when?
Look. Okay, so think about it like this. You're going to be hearing about this, sharing the burden. And in fact, in this clip back here, he was going to be talking about sharing the burden more. And I just, for the sake of time, cut it out. So you'll hear that. But it's not a reason to not be involved in Ukraine. It's a legitimate concern from the Trump administration. But I think philosophically, Waltz is inclined to be pro-Ukraine as long as it's not just the U.S. picking up the bill. And then Trump will be able to do a victory lap about how, see, I got NATO to pay their fair share and take care of. Okay, I think that's, so Waltz is actually a really good, like if you had one person to replacing Jake Sullivan with someone like Waltz, this is a good day for Ukraine. Okay. During a meeting with Zelensky in September, Trump showed interest in 2 points from the victory plan. And I talked about this. This was really interesting. The idea of replacing some American troops stationed in Europe with Ukrainian soldiers after the war. That means they'd have to win to be able to do that, right? And be able to be stationed elsewhere. And then we wouldn't have that burden. And gaining access to Ukraine's critically important natural resources. Both of them caught Trump's eye. Now, according to people involved in the development of the plan, they were thinking, what if Trump wins? We want to have this as part of the puzzle. These ideas were specifically tailored for Trump to influence him to go the right direction. Influential Republicans provided advice on how to best formulate proposals that would encourage closer cooperation with Kyiv. So that was intentional. Okay, next big story. The resolution was supported by 116 states. What? Well, in the United Nations, the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly has voted in favor of a resolution. Just listen to the resolution before I explain it. Quote, combating the glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to the escalation of contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Okay, I'm against Nazism too, but this was sponsored by Russia trying to shame the rest of the world about how you don't care about Nazism, and a lot of countries went along with it. Like if you look at who voted against it, it's mostly Europe because they understand that this was like a a rationale for them invading Ukraine. So what countries voted against it? There's 54 of them. It lost by like 116 to 54. Albania, Australia, Belgium, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Canada, Croatia, Cyprus, Czechia, Estonia, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Malta, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Montenegro, Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Palau, Poland, Portugal, Republic of Korea, Republic of Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Tonga, Ukraine, United Kingdom, United States. It's mostly North America, Europe, and then a few other countries sprinkled in. But this is important because Russia is using the UN to justify its reason to go in, like without defining what Nazism or neo-Nazism is. And then they're going to say, well, look, we have this UN resolution that, yeah, they're using the UN, almost mocking the UN by putting something like this together. Now, a few days ago, I think it was German Chancellor Scholz who was saying that instead of joining NATO, maybe Ukraine would have like the Finnish solution. Well, the Finnish foreign minister opposes imposing neutrality on Ukraine, citing Finland's history with Russia, warning it could harm international order and Ukraine's sovereignty. So even Finland doesn't want a Finlandization solution of Ukraine. Okay, last little bit by Darth Putin. On this day in 1940, Soviet foreign minister arrived by train in Berlin, received the Guard of Honor, and had a friendly meeting with Hitler. Totally not allies. If Ukraine was actually Nazi, we would sign a peace deal with them, and we'd actually honor it, unlike every other one that we've signed. Wow, what a great point. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.